video, we're gonna walk through how you as an e-commerce company can ship your products faster while making sure you're optimizing for the lowest possible shipping cost. In e-commerce, your margins are already so thin that making sure your shipping is optimized, fast, efficient, and cheap is hard to do. And so we're gonna walk through a couple different strategies that we use both for our 3PL and for our own e-commerce brands to help do that. My name's Brennan, and I am the owner of an e-commerce fulfillment company based in Portland, Oregon. I got into that from starting my own e-commerce brands. We're still running it out of the same warehouse and still own and operate those brands, but we've been shipping for ourselves for 10 years, and we've been shipping for other people via the 3PL for probably 5 years now. Almost all these companies have been e-commerce focused, and so we've seen a little bit of everything over the years, and especially when we onboard a new customer, these are the first things that we're looking at about how are we able to increase delivery speed while cutting costs. So first off, whether you're a brand working with a 3PL or maybe you're still self-fulfilling, the first thing that you should be looking at, whether you're a brand working with a 3PL or you're still self-fulfilling, is the fulfillment process itself. Before we can even get into the actual rates and how to put things in the right packages to get them there the fastest, you have to make sure that your actual fulfillment process is efficient. There's a bunch of different ways to do this and strategies. So think about maybe you're batching multiple orders together that look the same, or maybe you're running a full pick and pack process, or maybe you're just batch shipping things out of ShipStation. That's where a lot of people start, right? But understanding what your actual process is and making it so it's as hard as possible for errors to be made while also making sure you're always getting the cheapest shipping requires having a really solid process in place. So laying this out, being clear on what that is, like I said, if you're a brand running your own fulfillment, then this is on you. If you're working with a 3PL, then that's on your 3PL and that's what you're paying them to be good at. But understanding what that process is and getting it refined and making sure it's a repeatable process is the first step in ensuring that you're gonna be able to deliver the most efficient delivery for your customers. So step number 2 is, let's say you have a pretty good grasp on your actual shipping process. This is probably one of the most important things in all of e-commerce shipping, is understanding your shipping rates. Shipping rates can be super confusing. There's a million carriers, there's a million different service levels. Everyone claims they're gonna give you a better deal than the other person. But getting a good grasp on what kind of products you're shipping, what are those characteristics like? What is your average kind of size of box and average weight? Because if you're a company that ships on average 50-pound packages, you're gonna wanna approach this situation a lot differently than someone shipping 2-pound packages. Also nowadays, a lot of carriers have special programs for flat rate shipping. I know FedEx has their 1-rate program, UPS has their 2-day program, USPS has always had their flat rate program. A lot of these will provide free packaging materials, and so you have to be thinking, okay, will those packaging materials costs offset even if the shipping's slightly more expensive, but I'm not paying for packaging materials? So big math equation there to think about, and luckily these days there's a lot of really good software that can kind of take the thinking out of it for you, especially when it comes to rate shopping. So one of the most common scenarios that when we onboard folks for our 3PL that we're able to help save money on is, let's say that, let's just take our case for example. We are in Portland, Oregon. Let's say we want to ship to Seattle, Washington. So for us, a ground shipment, probably 1 day to get to Seattle. Now the customer orders 2-day. If your mapping is set up so you're always gonna, if a customer orders 2-day, it's just automatically gonna go FedEx 2-day, you're gonna end up paying a lot more. Whereas if you have the right tools in place, your software will be able to tell you hey, we're gonna ship this the cheapest way to get this there in 2 days, but because of the proximity, that's actually ground. And so you might be able to save a bunch of money on that one package. Your package is getting there in the same amount of time, but you're probably saving 70-80% on that one package. Now, that's a really specific example, but a lot of this starts to come into play. I know for us, we ship a ton of FedEx 1-rate, and a lot of the times it ends up being cheaper for us to ship 2-day than it does for us to ship ground, because we're shipping a lot of lightweight products across the country. These are all a bunch of different comparisons that are good to run in Excel and get an understanding of, but you really need your software to be able to do this. And so for us as a 3PL, that's one of the main advantages of working with us, is we're able to just do that out of the box, right? The same softwares exist for brands, and I know ShipStation has offerings for this now, and so does Shippo and EasyPost, and there's all these other companies that will offer these sorts of things now, with making sure you are getting the best rate, that it falls within your SLA period to your customer. So back to the core focus of this video. How are you able to get your packages to your customers faster while reducing costs? Well, we talked about making sure your process at the warehouse is good. We talked about making sure that you're being smart with your rate selection, but as silly as it sounds, one of the most common things we see is things just being out of stock. So making sure you're keeping up with your demand forecasting, especially if you're on Shopify. I know there are a ton of good apps that are able to leverage a bunch of predictability across huge data sets to help you actually do pretty accurate demand forecasting that you can do now with the help of AI that you might not have been able to do 5-10 years ago, where that literally would have been 2 people's full-time jobs just doing demand forecasting. You can get out of the box now in a Shopify app, which is crazy. But making sure that you're actually keeping stock, understanding your timelines from order to get to the warehouse, especially if you're ordering from overseas. Timelines are changing all the time with boats and transit and all of that stuff. And so making sure you're just keeping stuff in stock is so important. One of the most cost inhibiting things we've seen is like, okay, you sell an order with 10 items, you have 9 of the 10. Well, you're gonna wanna ship that if you're gonna have to wait 3 months for the 10th item, right? Well, now you're paying for a whole nother shipment for that 10th item. You're paying for 2 shipments. And again, e-commerce is a game of slim margins, and in that game of slim margins, you can't afford to be paying for that shipment twice. And so making sure your stuff is in stock actually has a ton of second and third degree effects that you might not even think about, but are going to save you a bunch of money over the long run. So step 4, if you want to call it that, is working with a 3PL. So I started myself shipping out of my garage, slowly grew into our own like storage unit, and then went into our own warehouse, right, for our own brand. And ours was a little different because we were doing our own manufacturing a little bit, but really the fulfillment piece was a separate side of the business. And if I could have outsourced that, I probably would have in retrospect. I didn't really know it was a thing at the time. But one of the huge advantages to working with a 3PL is basically they do the first 3 points that all the points that we just talked about, in terms of they're gonna make sure your stuff's packaged right. They have a good process. They have incredible rates. They're going to have the software to be able to make those rate decisions, right? And then they're also going to be able to usually help you out a little bit with forecasting if you need it. Like 3PLs are usually the center of knowledge around e-commerce fulfillment, and a lot of them are always happy to help. I know especially a lot of friends that I have that also run similarly sized 3PLs. Like our goal is to help you out as a brand. And so if we're able to leverage our expertise and being in the space for so long to do that, we're always more than happy to. So that is kind of like a why you would work with a 3PL. I also totally understand not working with a 3PL. We never ended up working with a 3PL for our brand. I've consulted with a couple other brands and helped them do placements in 3PLs, but we never ran our brand itself in one. And that was just the nature of what our brand was, but it's totally valid to run fulfillment on your own. There's a lot of advantages to that in terms of like personalization and the different kind of things you can do. And in our case, we were doing like light manufacturing, which you couldn't do at a 3PL. So there's definitely scenarios and cases for both. Certainly important to understand and just compare, and every business is different. So I always think it's a valuable exercise. Even if you're running your own fulfillment, go price out a 3PL, see what it would cost, compare that to your own overhead, and see if you come close. It's usually gonna be slightly cheaper to do your own fulfillment, but maybe it's not with the way your lease works out or the labor in the area you're in. There's a variety of reasons that affect these sorts of things. So with all that said, hopefully you're able to take something away from this that is going to allow you to ship your packages a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper. And if you found this video helpful, feel free to give us a like and a subscribe. And if you got any other questions, feel free to drop us a comment below. I will answer it in a future video. And yeah, until then, happy shipping.